Welcome back. We will continue our exploration of the animal kingdom, specifically the invertebrates. And hopefully you remember the last phylum we covered was Cnidarium, but this PowerPoint presentation starts with phylum Platyhelminthes. So Platyhelminthes are flatworms, and they include planaria, flukes, and tapeworms. All right, so Platyhelminthes, as I just said, planaria, flukes, and tapeworms. Main characteristics, this might shock you, they're flat. This is how I like to remember it. Flat, flat. Platyhelminthes are flatworms. There, have you gotten your tuition dollars worth today? All right, other characteristics, they have bilateral symmetry. So this is different from cnidarians. Now, if you look at the road map I had you print out at the beginning of this module, you can see that we're truly into eumetazoan, right? The animals that have tissues, and they were subdivided. We have sort of a fork in the road between the animals with bilateral symmetry and radial symmetry. So the jellies and their relatives had radial symmetry. Now these animals are bilaterans. So we are in the clade of bilaterans. Most animals are bilateral, and therefore, do you remember what is true? If an animal is bilateral, it is also triploblastic. And remember, that means 3 germ layers formed during embryological development: ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm. So, other characteristics of Platyhelminthes, they are acoelomates. Remember that A means without, and without what? Well, without a coelom. So hopefully you remember from your chapter 32 vocabulary, a coelom is a body cavity, and flatworms do not have a body cavity. And flatworms still only have one gut opening. So it's not going to be as obvious as it was with the jellies and the hydra, but planaria and tapeworms, flukes, this grouping still only have one opening, a gastrovascular cavity. The mouth is the anus. All right, so one question we should address is, why do they have to be flat? I mean, this is the characteristic of this whole phylum, flatworms. So here's the hint. Remember, they're acoelomates. So let's review what this means. So once again, this shows you tissue that's derived from ectoderm. In every biology book in the world, blue denotes ectoderm or tissue derived from ectoderm, yellow endoderm, red mesoderm. So this cavity here, that is just the digestive tract. So that's not what we mean by a body cavity. There is no cavity outside the digestive tract. So this worm is an acoelomate. So let's think about this. You're a little flatworm. You are an animal, so you need to eat. What else do all animals need besides food? Well, hopefully you're thinking of oxygen. And this flatworm has no lungs. It has no respiratory system. So all the oxygen molecules, trying to write little O2s here, and I'm just going to do one. Now I'm just going to put a bunch of little dots. All the oxygen molecules have to diffuse into the flatworm. They can diffuse from the top, they can even diffuse from the bottom, but the important thing to notice is that flatworms have a very large surface area to volume ratio. If they were spherical in shape, then oxygen could diffuse into the first layer cells, but there's no way that oxygen could get to the middle. It's a dead zone. So there you have it. Flatworms need to be flat because water and oxygen have to be able to diffuse to all cells. All right, let's review where we are. The classification scheme: kingdom, or domain, kingdom, phylum. Remember all that? All right, we are in domain what? Eukaryote. What kingdom are we in? We are in the animal kingdom. So domain, eukaryote, kingdom, animal, phylum. In case you forgot, we're in phylum Platyhelminthes. So kingdom, phylum, class is the next smallest division. So in the phylum Platyhelminthes, there's 4 major classes. They're the turbellarians, again, mostly free-living. They're the monogeneans. There's the trematodes. And there's the class Cestota, which includes tapeworms. You do not have to memorize any of these classes, But I wanted you to see the names of the classes and even hear the names, because if you go on in biology and, for instance, study diseases, you're going to hear about cestodins and trematodes. And I want you to be familiar with these terms. In case you encounter them in the future, they'll be easy to learn. But again, the take-home message here is most flatworms are parasitic. So once again, if you're pre-med or have an interest in the health science and you do some advanced reading, you'll, again, read about tapeworms, you'll read about trematodes, etc., etc. All right, this little guy, though, is not a parasite. This is the best-known flatworm, the planaria. Now, I think this little flatworm is just the cutest little guy in the world. He's only about 1 inch long, about 2 or 3 centimeters from head to tail if he lengthened himself. He has eye spots here. Obviously, he can move toward the light. I mean, how can you just not think this little animal is not adorable with his big eye spots? Now, these protrusions that look like ears, they're actually chemoreceptors. So again, this is an animal. An animal has to eat by definition. So it can move toward or away from light. It can move towards certain chemicals. Now, speaking of animal and eating, you'd presume this little animal would have a mouth, which it does. But the mouth is not in the head region. Believe it or not, the mouth extends from the side. So when the planaria wants to eat, this little tube comes out from his side or her side, and this is called the pharynx, just like the back of your throat is called the pharynx, and then the opening here would be the mouth. So the planaria crawls next to its food and extends this little tube, and the mouth on the end might even excrete a few digestive enzymes, and it sucks up some food and it goes into that gastrovascular cavity. So, but I don't know if you've seen these in the wild, and hopefully we'll see some on our field trip. If you go to a stream or a creek that's clear and unpolluted, you pick that up, you'll see these little fellows, little critters, they're pretty translucent, and again, they're fairly small, just crawling over the bottom of a rock. Now, planaria are actually sort of pretty famous for regeneration experiments. I'm going to try to get rid of my annotations here. So we'll see if this works. There we go. All right, so planarias can reproduce asexually by regeneration. So if you would cut a planaria in half like this, the head end would grow a new tail, and the tail end would also grow a new head. Another thing you can do, you can slice a planaria, I know that sounds sort of cruel, this way, and the body will then, the right side of the head will grow a new left side and vice versa. So these are pretty amazing little guys. Another reason why they are famous is because of memory experiments. So believe it or not, you can train a planarian to crawl through a maze. And you might think, what? How can a little worm crawl through a maze? Well, some psychologists, these are classic psychology experiments, they invented a little T-maze. So it's not a complicated maze. And they would put a little flatworm, a little planarian, this little animal right here at the beginning of the maze. And all things being equal, they would crawl up and either go left or they would go right. But if you put a piece of food here, like for instance a little bit of egg yolk, you could train the planarian to crawl up and to always go to the left. And after they were trained, they would always go left, whether the egg yolk was there or not. Well, then what the psychologist did, after he had a trained planarian, he cut it in half so that the head regenerated a new tail and vice versa, to see which half of the worm stored the memory. Well, amazingly enough, both halves of the worm, after they regenerated, both worms would always go left. So he was fascinated by this. He concluded that memory had sort of chemical basis. So then he took it a step further. He actually tried a couple other experiments you could read about, but the most famous one is to try to figure out the chemical basis of memory. What he did is I'm sorry, this is going to sound gross. He put the little planaria in a little grinder and ground them all up. And then he fed them to some of their friends. Yes, planaria can be cannibalistic. So he fed the chopped up trained planaria to an untrained planaria. Lo and behold, the untrained planaria, after they had eaten their trained friends, they would go up and turn left. Now, besides being very bizarre, and this got a lot of attention, and there were some famous researchers had trouble replicating this experiment. But whether it was totally replicated or not, this was not a hoax, and I've attached a link to our Isidore site. Especially if you're a psychology major, you can read more about it. So anyway, that's all I have to say for planaria right now. Now another platyhelminthes is from again class Cestoda are the tapeworms. These guys aren't so cute. All right, every tapeworm has a head, and you'll see a video on this, and it's very graphic. All right, each head has hooks and suckers because these tapeworms live in the intestine of mammals, and this particular one specifically lives in the intestines of humans and pigs. So what it does, its head latches on to the intestine by these hooks and suckers, and then you have all these other segments. And if you look closely, you'll see the head has no mouth. No mouth at all. So the first question you might ask, well, how does it live if it doesn't have a mouth? Well, think of where this is. This is in the intestine. What is in your intestine? Digested food particles, right? That is the whole purpose of your intestine, digestion. So you have these monomers of your organic molecules, your little digested food particles, and they can diffuse right into these segments of the tapeworm. So it gets its nutrition actually by absorption. It does not have to personally digest the food. You digest the food for your own personal tapeworm, and the tapeworm just absorbs it. Now the question I want to pose is, should tapeworms really be put in the animal kingdom? They don't have a mouth and they don't eat their food. And we have defined animals as multicellular eukaryotes who get their food by ingestion. So this is going to be a little chat room assignment for you, because really I'm wondering, should we put tapeworms in kingdom fungi? I mean, aren't they multicellular eukaryotes that get their food by absorption? And once again, whether we decide to kick the tapeworm out of the animal kingdom or not, notice the structure is ideal for the function. Just like the mycelium of the fungus is perfect for absorption in terms of surface area to volume ratio, so is the structure of the tapeworm. So think about that. I want you to think about how a tapeworm is similar to a fungus and how it is different, and then we'll have to figure out whether we should really reclassify this organism. But moving right along, these little sections are called proglottids, and in each section there's nothing in it but gonads. All right, so there you have it. A tapeworm is a head, which again does not include a mouth or sense organs. That head is mainly the anchor, and the rest of the animal is simply gonads. Very effective, very gross. All right, speaking of gross, I'm sorry, I guess I shouldn't call, one of the amazing critters on planet Earth gross, but maybe you'll share these feelings. Up to 20 meters of tapeworms can be found in an infected human intestine. So this is one animal. One tapeworm can grow up to 20 meters long, which is about 60 feet. Now, today we have medicines to treat tapeworms, but in the olden days, a home remedy, if you had a tapeworm, which is living in your intestines, right? So this is my poor dwelling of a human head. One home remedy is to put some honey in the back of a person's mouth, like in the back of their throat. And after they sit for a while, the tapeworm would sense it and detach and come up to get the honey. And then you could pull and pull and pull and pull. Yeah, isn't that gross, to get that whole animal out of the infected human? This is not made up. You can give it a Google. There's also another home remedy you can Google to remove a tapeworm using the other end of your digestive tract. But I'll leave that for your own exploration. All right, let's move on to another phylum, Vertifera. Rotifers they might be my favorite animals. They're definitely one of my favorite animals. So one thing to know about them, they are very, very, very tiny. So for instance, you might remember an amoeba. Hopefully you remember an amoeba. It's part of the protist. Well, this might be an amoeba. All right, here's its nucleus or something. Okay, probably not that big, but compared to the size of a rotifer. The point I'm trying to make is this. Rotifers are multicellular animals, but they are smaller than many one-celled organisms. So what else should we know about rotifers? They have bilateral symmetry, which, as you know, if they have bilateral symmetry, they are also triploblastic. Rotifers have a pseudocoelomate, so or sorry, they are pseudocoelomates. They have a pseudocoelom, which means they have a body cavity, but it's not lined with mesoderm on both sides, only one. And, ta-da! They have 2 gut openings. Yay! I think this is a wonderful evolutionary invention where your digestive tract has an anus that is different from the animal's mouth. I just think that is personally a wonderful evolutionary invention, having an anus that is separate from the mouth. And whoops, I totally messed that up, didn't I? I hate it when I do that. All right, back to where we were. All right, I made the comment, leave it to the females to tidy up life. So why did I say that after 2 gut openings? As it turns out, almost all rotifers are females. In fact, in some species, we have never even observed a male rotifer. When you'll read about this in your study guides, when males do form, they're usually sort of a degenerative organism. They have no mouth, they can't feed, their only function in this life is to produce some sperm to fertilize the eggs and then die. Sorry guys, I'm not trying to be offensive, I'm just telling you as it is. So how do they reproduce? They reproduce by parthenogenesis. So what this means, this refers to when an unfertilized egg divides by mitosis into the full organism. So that's what you have. You have eggs are laid, but the eggs are not fertilized usually, and they divide by mitosis. All right, I'm going to pause it here so you can explore the videos, and I'll see you back here when you're ready.